attraction falls below standards and human rights. We also had Honorable Gafa Mbatekama from Kasambia, who said, by Honorable Chiwanda making women tourism issue, it is immoral and dangerous. And then we also had a statement from the then leader of opposition in Parliament, Honorable Winnie Kiza, who also, as you see in the PowerPoint, was very critical of the Miss Cave context. But on the February 28th, there was a U-turn, and after the organizers meeting the Right Honorable Speaker, Rebecca Kadaga, the contest was endorsed. And therefore, AFLI and Uganda Management Institute commissioned a study under the Uganda Policy Development Forum to find out what areas of innovation can we find, what are the gaps. And this informed the policy brief. So the National Policy Forum was held where two papers were presented by Professor Wilbur Manyisa, a renowned scholar in tourism, and Mr. Samora Semakula from the Uganda Tourism Board, head of quality assurance, who was the discussant. And then the policy brief was authored by Mr. Jude Remsisi, combining the outcomes of the National Policy Forum and what had been discussed by the citizens in response to this issue of a policy matter. Ladies and gentlemen, why do we focus so much on tourism? There are things we can look at to show that this area is very important to the Ugandan. For instance, we recognize that tourism is one of those areas that have been hit so hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. And if you look back on 2019, the contribution of tour and travel in this country was contributing 7.9% of the GDP. And then the tourism sector was singled out by a report of the Monitor as one of the largest income generating activities for the government in the previous 5 years. And it was employing directly 500,000 people. 500,000, that's a big number. But indirectly, you look at people who sell crafts, people in the transport sector, people in the accommodation sector, people, in the food sector. There are so many who are connected to the tourism sector, but it was hit hard. Ladies and gentlemen, just to give you some statistics as part of this workshop trigger, the World Tour and Travel Council and then the World Trade Organization are in a broad agreement that COVID-19 devastated the tourism sector globally and then, of course, locally here. In June, for instance, the World Tour and Travel Council was forecasting a fall in tourism by between 41 to 73% for 2020. And in November, they estimated a drop of 73% of drop of tourism, especially those coming to Africa. And then the International Air Transport Association, IATA, reported a 99% fall in international air travel by May. So this all affected tourism. And just to show you the graph, this graph is quoted from the World Trade Organization. It showed how tourism was doing, okay, if you want from 2000, but when we reached 2029, unfortunately, these videos, okay, if you look at 2020, there is a sharp fall in the negatives up to minus 30%. So what does it show? Loss of jobs, loss of companies collapsing and things like that. Next. Collapsing. And if you look at Uganda, this report from the UNBS, Uganda National Bureau of Statistics, it shows the change, okay, the impact of COVID-19 on tourism in Uganda, but the change in sectorial GDP contribution. You can see that in 2018, tourism was still low, 2019, it went up. Then it continued going up, and you can see by 2019, the graph was overtaking so many other sectors like agriculture and so forth. But the first half of 2020, you can see a sharp decline from the negative side up to almost minus 60%. This was this is statistics from the government of Uganda, which shows a serious collapse in the sector. Ladies and gentlemen, there's just some graph there to show you. We have the yellow line showing accommodation facility. You can see how the graph sharply falls until it flattens. And then we can see those in art and craft also going down. And then the travel agents was also losing business up down. And then you can also see average employment, that is in green, also falling. So you can see what COVID has done to this sector. Okay. Now, the questions that we asked ourselves in this meeting is that by March 2021, there was the MPs questioned how Uganda Development Bank officials disbursed 455 billion COVID-19 stimulus funds. We don't know whether the tourism sector was one of those considered, because even as the disease persists, but as we immunize people, people learn to social distance, slowly the sector will come back. But are we prepared? Or what are the interventions from the government side? Then next is, what areas of innovation do we look? Now, this is why we have brought Mr. Jude Remisisi, because he authored the policy brief and points out gaps. So we shall expect him to give us the findings and then the proposals. What are the recommendations? Then we're also asking ourselves, what are the policy options for sector recovery? We expect the government side to respond to this. Today, we were joined by a group of beautiful ladies from Bunyoro who are contesting they are led by Miss Bunyoro, Miss Chirunji. They are with us in the room. I like it when you see young people join such discussions touching governance. And then we also want to ask ourselves, what is the practitioner's experience? This is the reason we brought we are bringing on board Mr. Amos Wekesa, one of the people who have contributed enormously in the development of the tourism sector in Uganda. And then we also brought the Honorable Karim Masaba from Bale City, who is also the Shadow Minister for Tourism, Wildlife, and Antiquities. In this platform, we bring both government and opposition, because the opposition is the government in waiting, and it has options that they can offer the country. How even the government can pick and borrow and implement. So today, this is what we call our activity trigger. For me, was to contextualize, and then what we get from here, you the citizens and our leaders, we can use them for policy advocacy. So at this moment, I will take the opportunity to invite the Senior Research Fellow from Uganda Management Institute, who is also the author of this policy brief, to come and use his time to give us what they found and what they propose. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Mr. Jude Remisisi.
Mr. Jude, please unmute. You've been given the right to unmute.
Okay. I thank you very much, Dr. Werike, for that generous introduction. And all members who are on the floor. And I take this as a great opportunity to discuss this very important sector of tourism. I hope we can all see what I'm sharing.
Yes.
In the interest of time to cover the minutes that you have given me, I'll go straight to the sector. And you mentioned a bit about the importance of this sector. I would also like to mention that it's contributing, it's not only in Uganda where tourism is contributing significantly to the economies, but I would like to mention that globally, tourism has been documented to contribute 10.3% to the global GDP. And bodies like UN World Tourism Organization have put the contribution in fiscal terms to 1.5 billion. And in Uganda, it's the highest contributor to the economy. And although the return to the sector has been reported to be less than expected, we need to invest more in this sector. And when we see, Minister, as you mentioned, when we see the sector struggling to create some new tourism products, we think that this practice should be guided. I'm glad that the minister is present and he will guide us further on the steps they have taken towards this element of tourism product development. Of course, we cannot pass without mentioning that this sector has been hugely affected by the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And locally, we have reported a drop of 73% a drop of 73% was reported in international tourism arrivals for Africa. And that speaks a lot to the revenue that I have mentioned that we pick from the sector.
Mr. Jude, before you go, let me take the opportunity to recognize our two guests who have joined us and the room. One is Dr. Barilega Akankwasa, the Director Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, who has represented the minister. And then in the house, we also have the Shadow Minister for Tourism, the Honorable Karim Masaba. They are all in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Werike. And I welcome the Honorable Minister and the Director Antiquities. I'm lucky that you have come when we are just beginning. I mentioned that there's been a drop in international tourism arrivals for Africa since COVID-19. And this has greatly affected this sector, especially in terms of thinking of alternative tourism products. And as in the subsequent slide, I'll mention the importance of catering for documentation of emerging issues in the policy formulation system. The International Air Transport Association has reported 66% fall in travel revenues and that has not spared Uganda as well. We mention here that regulation of access and management of protected areas in terms of policy is catered for under the Uganda Wildlife Act and Museums and Monuments Act. But currently, as we speak, even in these very acts, there is a lack of guidance on how we manage emerging issues and interests. Before COVID, the biggest interest was tourism product development to boost the traditional or the conventional tourism products as we know them. But now this has been joined by what we now consider as the biggest hindrance to development, which is the pandemic. So as we discuss in this presentation, we shall consider these emerging issues and the need to produce products in consideration of these two. So there is a huge call for innovation, therefore, in the context of the pandemic and in context of the need to produce alternative tourism products to increase growth of visitors and increase promotion of visiting and increment of revenue. There's also a huge drop currently in jobs in the sector. Like all other sectors, the tourism sector has had its practitioners changing livelihoods, losing interest in tourism products because of lack of or minimal capacity to now develop new products that fit in this current situation. We have had reduced incomes, discounts in the sector to attract demand. Of course, the fall in tourism visits. But we say that all is not lost because in the event of SARS, which is another viral infection that threatened the world then. Sorry, this was 2003, not 1993. When the world recovered, there was a surge in tourism visits that led to a 9.4% growth in 2004. The same growth was higher growth was registered growth in the tourism sector. Growth of tourists from China, because they rely so much on tourists from China for tourism. Malaysia registered 39%. So what we are saying here is that even after that, we should prepare for a surge in visits after the COVID-19 pandemic is handled. So we need to develop more products in lieu of this, and so that the tourists coming after the pandemic has been managed, especially with the vaccines, find us more attractive, we give them better experience and attract more returns. So this might be a blessing in disguise if we manage it well as a sector. There's also an assurance that at any moment, tourists, especially from the West, will want to move away from their settings, especially in consideration of the winters. So even now when we have opened, as long as our airport remains open, we are likely to get tourists. So there is optimism that if we introduce new products, improve on the products that we have, we shall escape these threats. There are also adventurists and scholars who will keep coming. About 4 weeks ago, I was interacting with the scholars who had come to study Ebola and COVID-19, and we traveled to Kisoro. They could not escape the gorillas, so they had to visit. So we have these adventurists and scholars visiting even now. So all we need to do is have suitable products for them. Then we need to promote domestic tourism, but that will be discussed later. So what the main point here is that there is a huge need for alternative tourism product development. And this should be catered for to run away from the traditional or the conventional products when they are threatened. And to boost them even when they are not threatened, we need to boost revenues and create dynamism in the sector. An element of let's say a potential tourism product remains neutral or pristine until it obtains value. This means that in product development, we have to identify and give value to what we are promoting. If you consider the example of the Kavi, the Kavi pageant, that product that the ministry had considered, all they needed was to give value to it, attach value. What does it introduce? What interest does it give the potential client? How do we package it to attract interest from the potential client? And Ms. Kavi was picking up until it met a barrier in the culture and the socialization aspects of our society, of our people. Convinced that it was culturally sensitive, that it had considered the sensibilities around the culture of our people. So tourism product development is a sophisticated process that entails all areas of society: the politics, the culture, the beliefs around many of these issues, and should be technically processed, meaning scholars in the tourism sector should be engaged to develop a product so that research is conducted to ensure that the value attached, the packaging of this product attracts the desired attention from potential clients. So it must exhibit utility to the local population. Usefulness must be appraised regularly. Is it still relevant? And then we need to look at its resource value. How much does it bring? And not look at there are people who have potential products within them that they are proud of, they enjoy physical presence of these products, but then have failed to create the resource value for them. So towards product development, we need to look widen the spectrum of scholarly engagement, technical engagement, so that the product does not die out after we have invested. For example, Miscavi has died out, and we think that had it been well thought out and thoroughly investigated by the scholars in this sector, we would still be having it. Or we would have forestalled the negativity that it generated when it was introduced. So we need to consider these new products in terms of what the tourists will consume before and after their trips. This is now just a technical statement. Again, to emphasize the sophistication and the need for investigation before we launch some of these products. We need to consider the flow of resources when the product is introduced. How is the transaction going to be, and how will it look socially and politically? Because now, if you look at the product, is it going to add social value to the nation? Is it going to be diplomatically elevating the country in the diplomatic circles, or does it make the country laughing stock? I think many of you have seen this clip on WhatsApp about the Swazi. There's a very popular activity in Swaziland, the one where virgins are paraded and all this. The Zambian president was making fun of the king in Swati, you know. I think you'll go and look for it, but it kind of had a negative connotation because I think of the cultural orientation of the Zambians, looking at the girls merely as a sexual objects and not picking the tourism aspect, the cultural diversity. So, you know, so how does Swaziland position itself to project this activity beyond parading of virgins, but looking at it so that other countries and potential visitors may look at it in terms of cultural presentation, in terms of cultural diversity, in terms of growth, so that it is respected. And all that is done by scholars attaching the right diction to the product and projecting it in technical terms that other scholars may appreciate outside that context. So this process of product presentation, product development is highly technical, and the sector should appreciate that and give it much more attention. The products that we are now, that are now popular for Uganda, have been popularized by scholars from elsewhere, colonialists who were so interested in animals.
Mr. Jude, you have about 7 minutes to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we need to invest in this process of popularizing our new products ourselves. So I will skip some of the slides that already speak what we have said. So what is our concern? We have a huge concern that Uganda's tourism currently rotates around traditional products and hitting the revenue targets of government, influential practitioners in the industry. We need to change this to make tourism more interesting to other parties and widen the products beyond this tradition. By traditional products, we mean this focus on animals and the fauna and all this that is already documented. So we need innovation to diversify products and attract more tourists. There's a table of what we have: large lakes, rivers, wildlife, forests, and then others that we need to consider, like sporting events, arts, festivals, like Nyege Nyege that are receiving resistance should be promoted and packaged better to get political appreciation and therefore entering the policy. Then we have historical anniversaries, and we have an area that has been underrated, which is meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. And they are human-made products, but which are not originally designed or which do not fall in a conventional understanding of tourism products. And some of them, we have seen some of this at Namugongo, where the church uses its history to promote tourism. But we should also look at stately homes, historic houses. There's an Idi Amin edifice that has been spoken by tourism practitioners for a long time. One of these falls, I think the members, other panelists know this place very well. I don't exactly know, but when you're going to the northern Uganda, this is where they show you where Idi Amin was so interested and was bombed during the war. Such products. We have detention chambers in Rubiri. These should be highly documented, and others that are emerging. I can only mention a few, but considering leisure centers, then the friendly visits, garden centers, a number of products, including books. People are going to write, for example, about COVID. We need to use them to promote what happened here. So we are mentioning that Uganda's tourism potential is enormous but widely underdeveloped. I don't want to leave without mentioning the potential for canopy walkway in places like Nyungwe, which I haven't seen anywhere in our literature, even in our newspapers, and yet it is largely, it's potentially interesting. And potential tourism products remain in latent state as we concentrate on wildlife. Then we have a problem of tourism products being developed by fragmented service providers. There's too much independence of private actors in the sector, and a lot of technical support cannot flow very well in such an environment. So the ministry, for example, would easily mobilize this to follow a specific line in some instances, because they also need some liberalism. But the linkage of these actors is not strong. Although we have the AUTO, that Association of Tourist Operators, and others that we may not know, we need to strengthen that. Then there's training of our practitioners, especially at lower level, the guides, the waitresses, that we need more training, because now entry into our public universities to study hospitality requires high grades, which are not even terribly relevant at low level. So we need lower level training where the tourists interact directly with the product. Okay. So in relation to COVID, I think there's need for concentrated thinking, and I think that will be debated in the panel. We observe the threat to these products in a form of access roads, minimal investment, minimal capital. Government needs to invest in to capitalize this, facilitate private actors and things like that. Then the contradiction of national priorities, where government threatens to build dams at tourism products. And then training of rangers, we need to put it at another level, increase it so that their rating, which is already high by the way in the region, is further enhanced. So we recommend that we develop new products outside the now overly nature-based resources. And government should facilitate research in the tourism sector to strengthen the tourism product development. Then we need a national tourism database monitored by Ministry of Tourism, and also enriching the UBOS statistics so that any question, what number of animals of this species, access, for example, if you want to go to a facility, where is it based, what is its capacity, how many tourists can it receive, how many can it house, how many rooms do we have in this area. That beyond, I know we now document rooms, but there are other aspects of tourism of interest for the client that I can access it online immediately. We need also to negotiate for fixed funding allocation to the tourism sector, so that what we produce, what we give to the economy is returned not necessarily in equal measure, but in a reasonable measure. Currently, it is not. I think I was looking at 2.7% somewhere. So we need to, the minister and the technocrats of this sector should negotiate for this fixed funding allocation. And then we need to expand wildlife and adventure circuit. There are places like Piano Bay in Karamoja, which are not well exploited, and yet they are potentially rich, and the population, human population, is sparse there. So we can take advantage and expand the wildlife and adventure circuit. And government should work towards vaccination, increasing vaccination coverage to attract tourists who are skeptical of this COVID, our standing in as far as the COVID pandemic is concerned. So if we achieve herd immunity, it will potentially increase our visits. Chair, I beg to submit this for now and wait for the debate as members ask questions and contribute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Remisisi, for such enriching presentation. I'm sure if you had the time, you'd elaborate more, but I believe the keynote speakers and the citizens out there have taken the points that you have presented to them. We are joined by so many citizens on this platform, Zoom, and others who are live on YouTube. We recognize you. And I would like to take a few comments. Caleb Arinda proposes the promotion of domestic tourism in light of COVID. And then there is Miss Daisy Biaruhanga representing Bunyoro Kingdom in the diaspora. She's with us. And also we have a comment from Mr. Amio Paul. He says the strategy of promoting domestic tourism through advertising and places of which people can visit. And I think we shall mention more. And I can tell you, citizens, you'll have an opportunity to contribute. After the guests have spoken, we shall give you a segment for asking questions and making comments. I would like to take the opportunity to invite the Honorable Minister, Shadow Minister of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, Honorable Karim Masaba, to make his presentation from the other side of the opposition. Mr. Amos Wekesa, who is in Nairobi, is still caught up in a challenge, but he may join us later. So, Honorable Karim Masaba, you are most welcome, and please speak to the audience. Thank you. Honorable, kindly unmute your microphone.
Hello. Yes, Mr. Wei, can you get me?
Yes, now we can get you clearly, sir. Honorable, we can get you. You can go ahead, sir.
Hello.
Honorable, we can get you loud and clear.
Very much. I think I was having a slight problem with my connection, and I'm sorry about that. I'm up country right now in Mbale. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, my senior comrade. Thank you very much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to interact with our people. I've noticed the Honorable Minister is not around, he's only being represented, but I think he'll get all the communication and the message that we are discussing here. Allow me greet everyone out there, the panelists, all the audience, and everyone following out there. Thank you very much for tuning in and sacrificing your valuable time to take part in this activity today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm by name's Karim Masaba, the MP for Industrial Division, Mbale City, and I'm an independent member of Parliament, as well as the Shadow Minister of Tourism and Wildlife. I've been listening in from the start, and I would like to thank my colleagues who have just given us some of the few highlights or detailed notes on what is happening around the world, because as we all know, things have not been normal due to this pandemic, and we're all trying to survive and find a way of living through these hard times. I've been given about 20 minutes. I'll try to summarize. I had a lot, but I'm going to try my level best to summarize and bring it out in as few minutes as possible. My Honorable Minister is not here, but I would like to thank him, I think, or perhaps his predecessor, for the work they did to maintain the international borders open, because it is one of the things that has been affecting so much our tourism sector. I think you remember in the previous lockdown, it had a huge impact. So I would like to thank them for that, because keeping it open, at least it gives us an opportunity to have some of the few visitors who can still be able to travel to come here. So we are grateful for that, and we hope it stays that way, because COVID is still there, and we expect more waves to come. We are just in the second wave. Some countries have reached the fourth wave, so we anticipate any time from now, we shall be going into further lockdowns. More waves will be coming, but we hope the international borders will stay open for the tourists to come in. Over the years, you've noticed, some of you who have been following critically the economics of this country and how the budget is allocated and how things are planned. Government has, over the years, let down the tourism sector, because this is one of the biggest forex exchange earners, as my former colleague talked about it. We are getting over 1.6 billion, but when you look at the money being allocated, it is quite unfair. So you cannot expect to get milk from a cow when you're not feeding it. So this is something, as the shadow minister, I think I'll be raising, or I'll be following up with my other colleagues, because we believe once this sector is financed in a better way, then we can hopefully get more from it. When you compare with our countries, our neighbors, our neighboring countries, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, they're putting a lot of money into tourism. You've seen Rwanda, it's advertising on one of the clubs in England, that is Arsenal, Visit Rwanda. So this is a huge investment, but these are the people we are competing with for the same tourists. So how will people come to Uganda when they don't know it? So this is something we are still fighting for. And I believe as a country, as a government, we need to put a lot of efforts on it and see how we can change this. Because our budget, that was the budget framework paper, which came out, and the budget which was read, that was vote 22 and vote 1117. We saw something close to about 193 billion only being allocated to this. And there are sectors which are being given trillions of shillings, the lion's share, the defense, they are getting a lot of money. And we are Uganda as a country, we are not at war. So where is this money going? And most of it is being categorized as classified expenditure. So the common Ugandan down here will not know how or where this money is going. So these are the things I think we shall need to follow up on. And I pledge as the Shadow Minister of Tourism, I will take up this responsibility and follow up.
The Honorable seems to be experiencing a network challenge. Sorry, we seem to have lost him due to network challenges. I know there's a very big mountain behind where he's seated in Mbale, but from what he's talking, I see he's raising issues to do with the budget, and saying the allocation of the budget towards tourism is limited. But I'm seeing him. Honorable, you can go ahead. I know you had a network challenge. You are muted, sir.
I'm sorry about, as I informed you earlier on, I'm in Mbale and deep down in the village, in one of the villages called Makoha on the slopes of Mount Elgon. So the network here is not quite good. I'm sorry about that, and I hope it can be much better. So I was talking about government not playing a huge role. This is something we need. What has the Uganda Tourism Board been doing? It is really doing nothing much to help. And this is something we need to take up on as a government, as a shadow minister. I think I will try to engage more of the private players, and we see how government can come up with. As a shadow minister, my responsibility is hugely to bring up the alternative policies that government can take up. So in case cabinet has failed on this, me as a minister, part of my portfolio is to come up with policies, to come up with decisions which I think will be right, and I am given the opportunity to present them on floor of parliament. So this is something that I think we should really do much. You talked about, the colleague talked about the UDB fund. This is something we've been following because I've been part of the parliamentary task force on COVID-19. So we've been trying to follow up on some of this accountability. And I've noticed not many people in the tourism sector have benefited from this fund. So this is something that we are still investigating. And in one of our recommendations, we asked for the government to come up with a detailed list of all the beneficiaries of these monies. Over 500 billion. Where did it go? We are seeing single players, someone alone taking 20 billion. That is the gentleman, the owner of Akamwesi, taking 20 billion. 20 billion. What is he going to do this money for? When you compare it with, for example, the stimulus package that was sent to the people, the common Ugandans received 53 billion. So there are things we need to revise. As a country, we are giving the vulnerable people 53 billion, and we are giving 20 billion, half of what we gave to the entire population. That is what we are giving to one individual. So this is something I'm going to take up on, and I'm waiting to see the lists of the beneficiaries of the money which was released to UDB. But some of the complaints I already got from some of the players is that the requirements to access this money were too much. They asked for a lot of questions. They asked for a lot of security and all that. So many people didn't get the opportunity to access this money, and you had to be requesting for money over 100 million. And we have people who are operating tourism vans, and they needed, say, something like 20 million to cater for small expenses, the operation expenses, and these people could not access these funds. So we are having a big problem with the government in general. But it's our role as the opposition, as a shadow cabinet or shadow government, to try and raise some of these things. And we believe our colleagues could get to hear our voices out. That is why I expected the Honorable Minister to be part of this platform, but unfortunately, I think he has been caught up. Then the other thing about promoting tourism, this is something that I have noticed in some countries. I don't know if you've seen the Air Tanzania, how they have branded their planes. So this is something we could take up on Uganda Airlines. It only has the photos of our flag, but we could try to market some of our places, like Bwindi, we brand it out on these planes. We could brand some, we could put our chimpanzees there, our gorilla. So this is something I thought of. I've seen it in many countries. Try to use it to promote tourism. Properly doing
Honorable, again, you are suffering the network interruption. Sorry about that. But ladies and gentlemen, from the Honorable submission, I would summarize as follows. 1, mentions budget allocation being low for the sector. He talks of marketing of tourism being inadequate.
To do a lot.
Issues of branding. He also talks about issues of access to the stimulus fund as unfair. And then he raises the issues of accountability in respect to the money given. So as a shadow minister, I think those are the issues he has stressed. But we shall give the Honorable another time to wrap up. So at this moment, as he sorts out the issues of the network, I would like to invite the representative of the minister, that is Dr. Akankwasa Badirega, to address us. He's very knowledgeable in that area. When I said doctor, he's not really a medical person, but he has learned a lot in respect to his area. And you know, technocrats have implemented things. They know a lot that we do not know. Sometimes we talk from the side and information that we quoted, for instance, I showed a graph which was generated by the Ministry of Tourism. So these are the people in the kitchen. So Doctor, I would like to invite you to speak to the citizens of Uganda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ndugu Dr. Werike Gerard. Like you have introduced me, I'm Dr. Akankwasa Badirega. I am Acting Director for Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities. I'm standing in for my Honorable Minister, who sends the apologies and greetings. He could not be here, not because of his making, but due to unforeseeable commitments, he's not been able to make it, but he's with us in spirit. I will now proceed to make my contribution, beginning with recognition of the Honorable Karim Masawa, the Honorable Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister for Tourism and Wildlife, distinguished colleagues, organizers from UMI and the Africa Leadership Institute, our authors and the facilitators, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for organizing this policy dialogue on development and marketing of tourism products. I've had an opportunity to read through the entire policy brief, and I can confirm that everything that has been talked about is true as presented in the policy brief. I have literally gone through word by word, and if I may go to key findings, since the time is limited, I will go to key findings. The underdeveloped products, that is very true. If you look at section 421 of tourism policy for Uganda, 2014, this is highlighted as a challenge. The narrow product range, same thing. Weak self-regulation and weak government regulation, all these are identified in section 4126 of the tourism policy for Uganda. Inadequate skills, weak stakeholder engagement, limited capitalization, etc. So I can confirm from a government point of view that the authors and the speakers are speaking to reality on the ground. And if I may go to recommendations, participatory identification, development and marketing of tourism products, this is the objective one of the tourism policy for Uganda. It is identified as the first objective. And then if you go at evidence-based product development, same thing, it is prioritized under objective one of the tourism policy for Uganda. Training of practitioners, this is objective 4 of the tourism policy for Uganda. If we look at the recommendation on database to monitor sector performance, this is specifically provided for in section 7.5 or under the objective 5 of the policy, tourism policy 2014 for Uganda. Supporting of research, again, this is prioritized under objective 1 of the tourism policy for Uganda. Having autonomy of UA, yes, the funding of UA is already autonomous. It is established by Uganda Wildlife Act, and under Uganda Wildlife Act, the Uganda Wildlife Fund is established. And so that's already the practice, and that's where we are. Introducing of new products, canopy walks, bang jumping, yes, all these are planned and prioritized as far as NDP 1. If you go backwards to read in the National Development Plan 1 for Uganda, you will find the canopy walks, they are prioritized as priority projects. Pian Upe, this is planned for upgrade into a national park, and the technical assessment is already complete. So this is already work that is halfway. They need to promote domestic tourism. This is already ongoing. So what am I saying? My view is that everything that has been identified for policy reforms are true, and these are already actually the policy position of the government, the identification of the challenges, and the diagnosing the problem properly and setting interventions to address the challenge. This has been done. So the question is, why haven't we moved? I think that's the question for everyone. Since we know what we want to do, if you go to NDP 1, if you go to NDP 2, NDP 3, all these things are clearly identified, absolutely 100%. So the question to me has partly been addressed by the shadow minister for tourism and wildlife, and I'm happy it is coming from him, because resource allocation is entrusted to Parliament as by law established. So I'm very happy that this is coming from the shadow minister, and we look forward to pursuing that. What is the challenge, and why are we not moving as fast as we can? Of course, with the little resources, a lot has been done. As you know, we've been able to secure the wildlife resources for Uganda. Uganda is one of the few countries with a growing population of elephants, if not the only country in Africa with a growing population of elephants. We've made progress from only 2,000 elephants. We are now talking of 8,000 elephants. And it is the only population of elephants in Africa that is growing. In other words, positive trend. All the others are on a negative trend. So we've recovered the wildlife population and consolidated the wildlife as a product. Now, we've embarked on development of cultural-based products. You must have seen that we've now put information center and the part information interpretation panels on Nyero Rock, paintings. We've opened the regional museums in Soroti, in Kabale, and related areas. We are revamping the National Museum to transform it into state-of-the-art museum to address the cultural product packaging and offering. We still have gaps on water-based attractions. We have a lot of water-based attractions that we need to develop. We have plans to develop a cable car system on Mount Rwenzori. This is already a prioritized project under National Development Plan 3. We also have prioritized, and works is progressing on the transformation of source of the Nile as a state-of-the-art global standard tourist attraction for Uganda. Government has supported, as you know, transformation of the matters shrines at Namugongo. We've supported the restoration of Kasubi tombs as a way to promote cultural tourism, but a lot remains to be done. And the biggest question, the biggest elephant in the house, as has been identified rightly by the Shadow Minister for Tourism and Wildlife, is really resourcing. Resourcing has been the biggest constraint to faster achieving the products development and promotion and marketing. With little financing, we've been able to establish market direct representatives, or what we commonly call MDRs, in our key source markets of UK and Ireland, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, United Arab Emirates, Japan, and China. Now, this is the first time in the history of Uganda has Uganda established direct market representatives in our key source markets for tourism. And the results are already being seen. As you know, we've grown our tourist arrivals to up to 1.5 million, moving from as low as 200,000. So it has been a transformative journey. A lot, of course, remains to be done, but it can only be done when we address the key binding constraints. We have plans for product diversification, for promotion and marketing, for skilling. As you know, Uganda Hotel and Tourism Training Institute is being transformed into a center of excellence for tourism and hospitality training. And an application, a 3-star application hotel, is already 80% complete and should be unveiled very soon to be able to impart skills in our citizens so that we can compete better. We do not need to import hotel managers anymore. We should be getting hotel managers from Uganda when we develop our center of excellence for hospitality and tourism training in Jinja, which works is almost complete. To just drive the point, to drive home the point I'm trying to say. If you look at the budget, for example, and the NDP3, because National Development Plan provides the minimum funding levels for each sector, because the funding levels for NDP3 are really not the ideal funding levels, but is the minimum funding levels that can move the sector forward within the binding constraints of the resource envelope, because we must appreciate that we are operating in a resource-constrained environment. All sectors have demands on the national cake, and so we cannot have everything. But with the limited NDP3 ceilings, I can tell you that the sector this financial year is operating at 44% resourcing. The 44%, ladies and gentlemen, is not of the ideal funding levels. No, it is for the minimum funding requirements of NDP3. We are operating at 44%. If you look at promotion and marketing, this financial year we are operating at 26% of the NDP3 minimum requirements. And if you go to product development, which is our key theme for this policy engagement, this year we are operating at 10% of required financing. Only 10% over the minimum, not over the ideal. I want you to get to the difference. NDP3 funding is the minimum required, not the maximum, but over the minimum we are operating at 10%. So ideally, miracles cannot happen, but we are doing everything possible. And I think there is tremendous progress. The situation has been much worse in the past. We've seen increase the sector allocation, but the sector allocation remains below the thresholds required to make a transformative fundamental reforms in product development. So the key thing here really is that we need financing of the sector. You cannot get quality people unless you have resources. You can't get quality products unless you have resources. So I think since we are now speaking in the same tone, since the people responsible for resource allocation are speaking in the same language as we are speaking, we have all hopes that the sector will be supported to continue making a significant contribution to transformation of Uganda. I mean, we are getting less than 1% of the national budget, but with that less than 1% of the national budget, we are able to contribute up to 8% of GDP. We are able to be #1 foreign exchange earner for the country with less than 1% of the budget. So when Honorable Karim Masaba goes to Parliament and they do appropriation properly, we can promise Ugandans that this sector will contribute to Uganda attaining middle income status faster, because it has high ability to create jobs, to create incomes, to create foreign exchange. There is a lot of, multiplier effects from tourism, because tourism will enhance agricultural production. We are consumers. The sector consumes agricultural products. The sector will provide the market for crafts, for example. So the sector will lead to improve the infrastructure. So if you address tourism, you've actually addressed many other sectors because of the multiplier linkages of the tourism sector. So once again, I want to thank the organizers and the authors of the policy brief, and to confirm that what they have found and what recommendations they are making are really valid. They are in sync with what government is thinking and what government has prioritized. We are not short of policies. What we need is implementation, implementation, and implementation. And you can only have implementation if you have the right human resources and if you have the right financial resources. I thank you. So we say if you can take.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You have given us a lot of information, and this is very critical for ourselves and the citizens of Uganda. We thank you for for owning up to the policy findings of the policy brief and the positive attitude of and the willingness of government to address the issues that are in there. We noted from your observations really contributing 8% and budget allocation of less than 1%. I think it's a great challenge to the appropriators of the budget. So Honorable Karim Masaba, I think the ball was pushed in you on your side. Maybe issues of appropriation could be addressed from the Parliament side. We are also very happy to learn about the innovations by the ministry that we have had as presented by the doctor. And then really the challenge of underfunding is a problem. Working at 20% capacity could be really a big challenge. From the listeners out there and participants, I could say I have comments from 3 Ugandans, Mr. Mumbere Crispas, Mr. Oriema Edson, and the name I can't see the name, but what I can say, they are decrying the high charges at the tourism sites, that even as we try to promote local tourism, we have to address the issue of charges to visit the various tourism sectors in the country. Mr. Judre Misisi noted very important issue of vaccination, that if we could achieve the vaccination rate of 80%, probably our tourism sector would improve. Ladies and gentlemen, out there without you, you have the opportunity to raise a comment, question to the keynote speakers. We have Dr. Akakwasa still with us. We have Mr. Judre Misisi still with us, and we have Honorable Karim Masaba with us. So just raise your hand. My friend Marvin will take up. You raise your hand, and then we shall give you an opportunity to speak. But please be brief to the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Orike. If you participant and you have anything to, a comment or submission, you can just raise your hand and I'll ask you to unmute. But in the meantime, I can see Mr. Oriema Edison saying that without waiting, we can rejuvenate the sector by encouraging domestic and local tourism by slightly reducing the charges at different tourist sites and local advertisements to be done so that local people can vigorously pick up to support the sector, because currently influx of foreign tourists have reduced because of the pandemic, and every nation is trying to recover its economy. So let me have Mugabe look, unmute and have your say.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I heard talking about the budget allocation for the tourism sector, but currently there are some actually the local tourist investors, like the people who are promoting local tourism, that like the local communities. What they say, what they say of the government, because it's the government which controls everything. What I know, what is the say of the ministers and the current speakers over that issue?
Thank you. Benson Ochen, please unmute and have your say. Benson? Okay. Benson, if you're not there, let me have Rogers.
Hello?
Chiega. Okay, Benson,
Hello?
go ahead. Benson, go ahead.
Yes, I think I have just two quick comments.
Okay.
One is the issue of putting less than 1% to the biggest contributor. I compare it to starving the cow that produces the milk. And I think this again a case of where we don't prioritize and feed the sectors that keep us alive as a country. So I think this is a challenge to now our members of parliament, even the executive and the cabinet, because the budget originates from cabinet, from the president, and it goes to parliament. And knowing how the law is, sometimes parliament cannot adjust beyond 10%. So I think the two arms of government should really start taking tourism very, very seriously as a cash cow that can sustain us. Secondly, I think I have the issue of promoting domestic tourism. I once visited the deepest lake in Western Uganda and I was shocked. Sometimes I get embarrassed when outsiders know my country better than me. So I think there's a need for a deliberate policy shifts, policy reforms to see how we can strengthen domestic tourism. Recently, in my region, we discovered a tunnel in one of the districts. Somebody was digging his toilet and he ended up into a tunnel. Up now, we do not know what was there, stretching about to 20 meters or 30 meters down there in various directions. And it became a very serious tourism, a local tourism attraction. The owner of the toilet was charging 500 shillings for you to go down there to see. And he made something. So I think we need to identify, and I want to applaud the minister, the president, for identifying Ngero, which is in my area, and other areas that need to be strengthened and promoted. We need a deliberate effort to strengthen local tourism so that we know our country better than the foreigners. I think to me that is good. I thank you all.
Thank you, Benson. Let me have Rogers Chiega. Rogers Chiega.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, greetings to everyone. And my name is Chiega Rogers. I am a student at MOBS, pursuing a Bachelor's of Commerce. Well, I happen to be following policy development and policy processes that happen throughout the country because first I'm a Ugandan, very concerned. When you look at the budget framework paper under tourism, it clearly says and has an estimate of $2.7 billion in the year 2025. Okay, and one of the ways in achieving this target in form of tourism receipts is strengthening conservation of natural and cultural heritage. So basically, my question handles the issue of policy interventions, crisis, and how we can recover. So my question goes to the policy maker, and I think this is Honorable Karim. How best is he going to use his office to address issues of investors encroaching on natural heritage, all in the name of boosting industrialization and national development? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rogers. Thank you, Rogers. Let me have Daisy. Daisy Biarhanga. Daisy Biarhanga, go ahead.
Second, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sorry, my camera has somehow got into trouble. It won't show my picture, but I hope you can hear my voice.
Yes, it's okay.
I'm Daisy Biarhanga Moti. I'm based in the UK. I am the diaspora representative of the Omukama of Bunyoro.
Yes.
I've got one question and I would like to raise concern. I'm really shocked that we only had 107 visitors to our Uganda museum, whereas here in the UK, at a museum called Pitt Rivers in Oxford, that holds 267 artifacts of Bunyoro, we get over 1 million people coming to see this. It is my appeal to the ministers, to everybody in Uganda, to join hands with our king to make sure that we build an appropriate museum or cultural center so that we can have these artifacts repatriated, brought back to Bunyoro, brought back to Uganda, so that that 1 million number of tourists, they will be coming to view them in Bunyoro. Can you imagine how much money they will be coming with them? Can you imagine, even as the local people, to see that the first doctor who operated on a pregnant woman who delivered by cesarean was a Bunyoro, and all his equipment is based in Oxford. Please, please let the government support the Bunyoro Kingdom to get back our artifacts. But we need to build a museum. We cannot put everything in a suitcase and they will all smash within a second. I'm really hoping this issue will be taken on board. Hopefully, come next year, 2022, all the 1 million visitors will be coming to Bunyoro. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy. I think Dr. Barirega, you've noted the concern. Let me have Mr. James Opito. Mr. James Opito, in 1 minute. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. This is James Opito from Gulu. I would like to concur with my friend, Mr. Benson Ekwe, who has talked about milking. I mean, not feeding the cow that we are milking. Tourism being one of the top income earning sectors in Uganda, I think we should learn a lesson from the COVID-19 impact. Now we realize that looking at only the external tourists is not sustainable. We need to revamp the tourism sector by, putting an impetus for, tourism within our own communities. How can we invest in local tourism, sites in Uganda? This requires us to put a very, a clear paradigm shift in terms of advocacy to ask government to revise even the indicative budgeting figures for, tourism, for example, so that we do not budget as we normally do. It should not be business as usual. We now know that it's a challenge in Uganda. Most of our planners, because normally the budget is normally done greatly by planners, and there's this tendency of only adjusting figures by some percentage. For example, you now look at the technocrats asking, us to budget to adjust budget by maybe 5% or 10%. I think this is something that we need to revise. Hello.
Thank you, James. I'm going to cut you short. We've got the point, and we shall move on. Let's now go from Northern Uganda. Let's go to Western Uganda now and have Mr. Mohanji. Mr. Mohanji Robert. Yes, Mr.
Thank
Mohanji.
you so much.
Yes,
Robert Mohanji, the Executive Director, RDP Uganda, a youth organization based in Midwestern Uganda. I want to concur with my colleagues who have just spoken about the budget and most importantly about the publicity. I'm wondering that you find majority of these districts in Uganda have district tourism officers, and I ask myself what exactly they do and if they are also facilitated to do their work or they are in offices to earn salaries. I'm bringing this on board because during 2020 COVID lockdown, actually the Masindi District Tourism Officer, Karungi Rita, opened our eyes by promoting the local tourism sites within Bunyoro and also the cultural sites. And then mapping out the cultural leaders who have knowledge about Bunyoro, about the kingdom and all that. And also organizing platforms where the source people are able to tell the younger generation of today about the history, about their culture, about things we don't know. Actually, we even got to know that the first people to make scientists came from Scott Ruhama University that was in Bunyoro Kingdom around in 1700. And we didn't know about that. So right now, the tourism district officers of Bunyoro sub-region have come together and organizing Miss Bunyoro, Miss Tourism Bunyoro. And many, because of that publicity, many private sector, many individuals, hotels are coming up to support the initiative. They say we don't have resources, but these are our ideas on how to promote our touristic sites. And then local private sector individuals are coming in to fund. And this goes to what the current speaker who has gone off has spoken. Bring out that indicative budget. And then if you have a proper plan, what is that value proposition you are putting before us so that it can attract us to fund it? And then you'll have the funding. And then we shall promote. The question is, what is that we are promoting that piques interest of someone to come and see, to come and visit? And I think this is what we should also focus on. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to have two more. Let me have Arinda Koleb. Kindly unmute and have your say in 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Arinda Koleb. Yeah, a recent graduate from Makerere University. I'm an economist. So my issue still remains on promoting domestic tourism. And I think we have a lot of tourist attractions in Uganda that are discovered but not well publicized. Basing on where I come from Uganda, we have a lot of tourist attractions, the mountain caves, the so-called Damabaliga Goti, and I hope if they are well publicized, then we can promote that. But then still on domestic tourism, the highest population in Uganda, they don't have enough money to tour, meaning that if we are to tackle tourism as domestic tourism, then we have to first focus on how we are going to eradicate poverty or how to put money in people's pockets so that they can now have the income to tour around the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Arinda. Lastly, I'm going to have Derek Niwagawa, and we shall move like that. Derek, unmute. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Derek Niwagawa. I'm from Kabale. My concern is just that if we've just seen that less than 1% of the budget is given to this tourism sector, and you see the tourism sector contributing 8% to the GDP of the country, I think to me and maybe to other fellows, this ratio is not proportional. How are we going to do that? Like, my question is going to Honorable Karim Masaba, that how is the Board of Tourism ready to convince and bid for more funds from the government? How are they going to present all that to the government? And we find they are contributing to the tourism sector more than this 1% for sure, because if we can contribute 8% to the GDP, I think that means that the tourism sector is being ignored that much. So like this board of the tourism, it should present more of its progresses. Like they've said, they had 2,000 elephants to 8,000 elephants. That's a big progress. Like they should all present all that to the government, and the government should be ready to contribute a lot of money to this tourism sector. So
Fred Bwambale, go ahead. Fred, if you're off, let me have Amnyongire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marvin.
Go ahead.
I really like the brilliant ideas put on table. But what I would like to put forward is that it's not that I'm against internal tourism or domestic tourism, but I really don't like it in a way that unless it is free, but we are exploiting still our Ugandans. If we are to increase on our economy, then there is nothing that we are adding on. The money that we already have would be put to other sectors. But I would rather encourage international tourism. The tourist centers that we have, it would be better if they are boosted to international levels, other than saying we can have more of domestic. We are not earning, we are not adding to our economy. That's all. Thank you very much.
Murunji, let me have Murunji, then we shall have Opolo Charles. Murunji, go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Sans Murunji Kabarangira, Chief of Staff, Uganda People's Congress, and Omobito Kati from Obukama Watoro. I'm so much excited about the plans of promoting domestic tourism. Personally, I've invested a lot in domestic tourism. However, I think the Ministry of Tourism should come up with a policy that will not only attract the citizens, but also make it possible for them, affordable for them to engage, in tourism, because you find it so unfortunate that the same charges they charge foreigners who have come to tour in their country, they're the same charges posed upon the citizens, which sometimes, as my brother has just said, that they are poor, we are poor, all that. So if the Minister of Health can come up with a standard policy to make it affordable to the citizens, it will help to encourage and promote domestic tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Murunji. Your concern has been taken. Let me have Charles Opolot. Lastly. Charles, unmute and go ahead. Charles. Charles is not there. Let me get back to Dr. Werike, who will now raise those issues to our speakers.
Thank you, participants, for your views, your contributions. They are very wonderful, and we still have all the people here that you have challenged to. But I saw what comes out in this. There are people who are suggesting issues of innovation, like Madame Daisy Ruhanga. We thank you from the diaspora for loving your country and participating in such discussions. I think I know some who suggest even the museum we have is not as good as it should be. If you borrow from some countries, you may find the history museum, the natural sciences museum, then development around the cultural sites, and so forth. But also recognize AFLI's CSO partners from around the country for participating. Mr. Benson Ekwe from the Public Affairs Center in Soroti, and Mr. Steve Robert from RDP Masindi, and then also Mr. Peto from the Gulu NGO Forum. Thank you very much. At this moment, I urge those who want to download this discussion that it will be on YouTube. Right now you are live. You can follow it up and use it for other secondary uses. So I'm going to take the opportunity to quickly invite the keynote speakers. Some are challenging the Honorable Shadow Minister that how are you going to use your position, for instance, to fight things like encroachment on tourism sites? How are you going to use your position to increase the budget? I think it's a challenge. Others are addressed to the Director, Dr. Akankwasa. And then let me first give Mr. Judro Misisi 3 minutes to wrap up, and then I will bring in Honorable Karima Saba and later the Director, and then I will invite Honorable David Pulkol, who has just joined us and is Executive Director of AFLI, to close the workshop. So you're welcome, Mr. Remisisi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Werik. Very impressive discussions and the debates. What I think we need to focus on from what members are discussing is the policies that are in place have to be strengthened with the implementation. I think the Minister's representative, Dr. Kankwasa, mentioned a lot of things that indicate that we have so much on paper and less in action, like those canopy. I'm particularly interested in the canopy walkway, and I haven't. It's one of the issues I investigated, and I didn't see action. But
maybe for the interest of the viewers, participants, Mr. Jude, what is the canopy in the simplest terms?
Beg your pardon?
The interest of participants, you are emphasizing the canopy way.
But the domestic tourism.
What it is?
The participants are emphasizing domestic tourism, which is an element that, in terms of tourism product development, has been lacking in investment and training. You've had one of the, I think it is Moronji, who said she has a product. She has invested in domestic tourism. Now, these are people that need support in terms of training. If you have a product, how are you going to attract tourists? How are you using the internet? How are you training your staff? How, government should invest in facilitating domestic tourism, because and you can see that we are all thinking in terms of diversity, alternative options in face of COVID that has kept the external tourists away. So I think emphasis on domestic tourism and funding of private practitioners, not giving away, but funding in a way that they return. Soft loans and things like that should be availed to potential investors in this sector, potential local investors. And I saw something like community tourism. We have products like community walks, transit walks in villages, and these need only training the villagers. Let me use that word. People at grassroots level to realize their potential and their likelihood to provide, to benefit in terms of revenue, but also to provide opportunities to tourists to study their culture and social environment. And there is a lot of talk about the cash cow and all this, but we need to dig deeper to know what are the causes and how do we negotiate with government. I think that is at Dr. Kwankwasta's level. How do you negotiate with government to increase the allocation? Because government also has its own arguments that you may need to face or to address before you suggest increment of budget allocation. So how have we positioned ourselves technically to justify increased allocation beyond saying that we are the one we bring in a lot of money? That is a technical question which I implore powers in the sector to consider. So the three areas, it is domestic tourism, but in consideration of the funding and increased knowledge of how to manage tourism products. Chair, I think, and also to kill the tendency of sitting on policies and not working on them. And also to look for funding. Thank you very much. Alternative funding from away from government.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Remisisi, for wrapping up. Then I'm going to invite the minister, the shadow minister, to also wrap up. Honorable Karim Masaba, you had some challenge from the participants who say, how are you going to use your position as a shadow minister to ensure, one, that encroachment on tourism sites is prevented, is stopped, and two, that to address the appropriation budget challenges within the sector? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much once again, Dr. Werike. The questions are a bit tricky. I think that was from my brother Nwagaba, then another one was from, was it Rogers and Moti? So on the issue of encroachment, that is something that has been debatable. And why have people resorted to encroaching and poaching animals? It's I think me as an analyst and as one who has been studying with various players in this sector, we've noticed that people don't tend to benefit a lot. These communities around these parks and everything, they don't get to benefit a lot from the tourism. They when I talk about benefiting a lot, is not because when you look at, for example, CP, those tour guides there, they get something small. But what I look at is the community at large. How is the community benefiting from the tourism? So I think government would have seen that a lot of money is coming from tourism, and then it would get a certain percentage of the money coming from tourism and put back that money into service, better service delivery in these communities around these parks and natural resources and everything. In this way, the people would be motivated. They would see that they are benefiting. They would see that they are getting a lot as well from the existence of these animals, these parks. So I believe it would reduce on their encroachment. As a community, they would get that sense that they get to benefit directly through better service delivery. Most of these communities are remote. You go to Kapchora and see the way they are living. So why do you think these people wouldn't encroach on this government land? Why do you think they wouldn't begin cutting down trees to burn charcoal to get timber? So these are things I believe as government we need to come back on a round table and find a way of addressing. Then I thought about setting up barriers in some areas to address the issue of human conflict, the human-animal conflict, because we find that people get to kill some of these animals because they have come into their property. They have come and destroyed their plantations. So they do it out of anger. So I think we shall go back on the drawing board and see if we can come up with some of these barriers that will prevent the humans and the animal conflict that exists. The other issue that the member raised was about the funding. Usually these things happen in committees. So as a shadow minister, I fall on the Committee of Tourism and Trade, but I don't have a voting right because my voting right was assigned to the Committee of Planning, of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Because as an economist, that is where best my services would be used. So I was put on the other Committee of Finance with a voting right and put on this committee just to follow and bring up matters. But when it comes to the time of voting, I don't get to vote. So this is something I expect the people on this committee to see a way of harmonizing. So I think we shall raise these issues. We shall bring these proposals to those committees. But once they are brought back, because usually some are brought back to our Committee on Finance, then we shall engage with the Ministry of Finance. We shall engage with the various ministries to see how well they can increase the funding. This has been going on. Unfortunately, fortunately, I'm just a new member. I've not been in the previous parliament. So I think this is something I've put a lot of interest in and I promise to follow up on. I don't know what has been happening in the previous committee sittings because I've not been part, but with this new parliament, I believe we shall try to follow up. I'll try my level best to follow up on it. Government needs to prioritize the tourism sector. My internet went off, unfortunately, but I had some of the few issues that I was bringing up, and the issue of vaccination is critical. In order to revive the tourism industry, we need to vaccinate the large quantities of our masses. We've spent a lot of money keeping people indoors, but yet as a country, we need to invest more into vaccination. This is something we need to prioritize right now. I believe it will boost our tourism sector. The other issue I think we need to focus on is our healthcare system. You know, we are in a tough times, and the tourist will come to Uganda, but he will say, in case, God forbid, something happened to me, where will I get treatment? And they're getting all whatever is happening around Uganda on social media. We've been short on oxygen, we've been short on PPEs, people are dying like nothing. So once they get this information, they will fear to come to this country. So I think we need to prioritize the health sector. We need to put up better health facilities around these national parks and tourist attraction centers. This will motivate people to come. People are scared of traveling to Uganda because they know we are in a dilemma. We are suffering. The country is crippling. Then I think my final issue is about security as well. I'm not saying this as a member of the shadow cabinet because I'm an independent member of parliament, but security is sometimes extremely rough. And every time this message goes out that journalists are being brutalized, then people have that image that we are back into the Amini regimes. I was fortunate to have stayed in Canada for some time, but the image people had were like, is Uganda still the same way it was during the Amin's regime? So this is something we need to change. So every time they see the high levels of insecurity, then they will fear to come to Uganda, and this affects our tourism as well. Yes,
Thank you very much, Honorable. You raised so many dimensions, and good we are represented by government here. Thank you so much. And on my own behalf, I would like to pose a question, and I don't know if the director who is representing the ministry would be comfortable answering it, but we have been seeing a challenge in regard to encroachment, not only by private people, but also by government. For instance, we have Bugoma forest issue, where we have had to carry all the chimpanzees and take away, and then I think promote growing sugarcane. And then we also bring a loan in parliament requesting for about 80 million euros to replant trees. So it's a contradiction. Is there a policy guiding that of cutting down tourism areas and then replacing with artificial forests, you know?
Yes, Doctor, that is a question I think the government should be in a better position to answer as well, because what we are having now is our government forgets that the tourism sector is bringing a lot of money. You've heard where they are trying to build dams on our falls, which are bringing in a lot of money. So this is something that we need to revise. The challenge we have is once cabinet makes a decision, then it is hard for it to be reversed. So this is something we need to take on. They forget, because my colleague talked about the NDP3. Yes, the NDP3 exists. And when you look at the tourism, the National Tourism Development Plan, it's there. But how is it followed? It's not followed at all. So this is a challenge we're having as a country. When the budget comes, it is not aligned with the NDP. So this is a big problem. These people, they need to go back on the table and revise. Because when you look at that National Tourism Development Plan, it talks about things like developing a pool of skilled personnel in the tourism and ensuring decent working conditions. But how many of the people in this tourism sector have benefited from government training, from government sustaining their better working conditions? So these are things that we need government to address.
Thank you, Honorable. Ansel Mzungu in the message says, we should focus on marketing local tourism other than looking at foreigners. But I know the director stated that marketing, yes, they're interested. But like this financial year, they are only having 20% of the target that the National Development Plan gave to achieve what they really want to do. So I think there is an obstacle in respect to the budget. But at this moment, due to time, let me invite Dr. Akankwasa, the Director, Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, to respond on issues that he has taken note before we invite Honorable David Pruko, the Executive Director, to close the workshop. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Werke, and thank you very much, all participants, for the wonderful feedback and comments. We take all of these in a good faith, and we receive the feedback and promise to consider and address and implement the interventions that are being proposed and raised here. I will run through a few things that were addressed to me. Of course, I agree with Jude and the Honorable Masabo on vaccination. We must fast track vaccination so that we can have the sector come back to life. And as you know, in the first phase of vaccination, government prioritized the tourism, and all frontline workers from tourism sector were vaccinated. We had dedicated vaccination for travel guides and the UA rangers. And so as we go into more phases of vaccination, when we receive more vaccination, definitely the sector will benefit, and I definitely agree. In terms of domestic tourism, several issues were raised relating to domestic tourism. I will address them in a collective way. First, to correct the record, we are doing everything possible to promote local travel, because local travel has very many advantages. But the first one really is citizens owning their products. If citizens own the products, they market the country better. And if every citizen is an ambassador of the country in terms of promotion, the sector grows faster. So we do not look at domestic tourism only from the point of how much we earn from it, but other benefits, including sustaining jobs in periods of scarcity of foreign tourists. As you know, in Uganda, we have largely about one peak in summer. That's when we get many foreign tourists. But in a non-peak season, we need to sustain these hotels, because they still have to create jobs, they still have to pay workers, they still have to exist. So we need domestic tourism to come in and address the shocks when international tourism is not there. But we also need domestic tourism for citizens to enjoy their country. That's our responsibility as government, to make citizens enjoy their country. These national parks belong to the citizens, and therefore the citizens must enjoy them, whether government is benefiting a lot or not. But as you can see, you can sustain jobs with domestic tourism, and also you can fill the gap during the low season for international tourism. But we definitely need both. We need international tourism and domestic tourism. Now, on the international tourism, lots of things have been done, and most of the focus has been on international tourism, largely because of the returns. And the private sector, of course, you heard from one of the participants, they prefer international tourism because it adds on the aggregate economy. But we also need domestic tourism to absorb the shocks. Now, we've done several things to promote domestic tourism, and one of the things has been to make it affordable The binding constraints in promoting domestic tourism has largely been the cost of accommodation. We've slashed entrance fees to national parks for citizens. So it is not true. This came from, I think, Murunji. It is not true that the citizens are charged the same way as foreigners. No, that's not true. Citizens pay only 20,000 Uganda shillings to enter national park. 20,000 Uganda shillings. And if it is a student, it can even be as low as 5,000 Uganda shillings. So we've deliberately made it almost, a nominal fee. It is almost free entrance, so that we can promote entry into these facilities. A foreigner pays $40 to enter a national park. Now, $40, if you use an exchange rate of, say, even if it was 3,500, really, you are talking of around 140,000 plus. A citizen pays only 20,000. So it's not the same. And our citizens are encouraged really to visit their products because the entrance is nominal. Even gorilla tracking, citizens pay 250 Uganda shillings. Non-citizens pay $700. That is millions now, in millions. So the citizens really should embrace domestic tourism, and the costs are very low. The idea of saying it is expensive is merely perception, but I also agree with the notion that we need to promote poverty, reduction, so that people have spending income. I will end the domestic tourism there. The other one was on encroachment. I think this came from Dr. Werhe. It's a hard one. First of all, I must clarify that the government is not involved in encroachment of protected areas. I am not aware of any place where government has encroached on protected areas. Where government wants to do projects, they do it in accordance with the law. And where citizens say no, government listens. I can give you the example of Mabira, it is still alive. I can give you the example of Murchison Falls, the dam issue. Government listened and we do not have a dam there. And so it is not true to assert that government encroaches. And of course, if you look at the trend of loss of forest cover, 80% has been on private land. That's not government. So only 20% of deforestation has occurred on government managed protected areas, especially central forest reserves. So it is not true that actually the encroachment is driven by government. Much of it is driven by citizens, by me and you, and it is our responsibility to ensure that we plant trees. Now, relating to the question of the loan to plant trees, first of all, this loan was really not only to plant trees. People vulgarized the loan because of not understanding it. It is investing in forest protected areas for smart climate development. It is going to promote, yes, tree planting as one of the things, especially in refugee host districts like West Nile, but it's going mainly to protect forests like Bugoma that you are talking about, forests in the Arbatine Graben, by strengthening law enforcement, by strengthening community tourism, which we also talked about here, by establishing electric fencing on protected areas where we have human-wildlife conflict. Those will be the main interventions of that project. But of course, the media vulgarized it that it is a tree planting project. Tree planting is just one small component. Lastly, Chair, Jude raised the issue of canopy walks. We do not have canopy walks ready, like I said. We've had plans to establish canopy walks in Chivale National Park and in Guinea Penetrable National Park, and these projects are still at feasibility stage, like I was saying, because of limitation of financing, they have not taken off, but they are in the National Development Plan 1, actually. They've been rolled from NDP 1 up to now in NDP 3. If you go into even the NDP 3 now, you will still see them prioritized, but they haven't taken off for reasons which I have explained here and which I will not go back into. I think those were the issues related to us. If there are issues that I have not addressed, I will download the recording, and I can promise that we shall take with good faith all the feedback received on this platform. Thank you. You are muted, Doctor.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your time, for addressing issues brought by the citizens of Uganda and the panelists. We don't take it for granted. Like I say, this discussion is live on YouTube and Facebook. You just look for Africa Leadership Institute and then you can rewatch it. I'd also thank you for making clarifications on the questions that I asked, but I felt there is one that was raised by Ms. Daisy Biaruhanga that was not tackled on some of the antiquities that were taken and out of the country. I don't know if you would love to respond to that, Doctor.
Well, that's a foreign policy issue. As you know, Bunyoro Kingdom has been pursuing justice from our former colonial masters. And I can confirm that the government of Uganda stands with the Bunyoro Kingdom to get justice from our former colonial masters. So I will take this feedback and we shall include it in our interventions to ensure that we push for repatriation of our stolen property and heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Without wasting time, let me invite the Honorable David Pulkol, AFRI Executive Director, to give us closing remarks. We have already overshot the time by 8 minutes. So Honorable Pulkol, you're welcome to give your closing remarks. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, everybody. Mine is just to thank all of you for finding time in your busy schedules to come to this space. Of course, Africa Leadership Institute, as a public policy think tank, we partner with UMI. We thank UMI, Uganda Management Institute, as a knowledge-based and training higher institution of learning that is partnering with us. We pick the issue from Parliament. We are a parliamentary monitoring organization. We pick issue from the floor of Parliament. We give it to academia, and the academia, in this case, goes and teases out the issue which requires policy elaboration, policy clarification, or even new policy. And we work together with the Cabinet Secretariat in partnership with UMI and AFRI to host the public, the policy forum at UMI. So this is a product of that process. When some people had thought Ms. Kavi should be a tourism product, and we said no, and there was a lot of uproar in Parliament, of course, to say women's rights are human rights. So we should not instrumentalize the bodies of our sisters, of our mothers, of our daughters, and therefore Ms. Kavi cannot be a tourism product. So that's now what invited us in academia to tease out and say, let's look at the tourism products in Uganda and how they are marketed. How can Uganda diversify? How can Uganda get the best out of its natural heritage? So we are happy that this policy brief has come. And therefore, I would like first and foremost to thank the minister who has sent the director here. Your participation in this public debate has really been phenomenal, and send our best regards to the minister. This is really what we want, because our role is to get evidence-based information, put it in the hands of, on the performance of Parliament and MPs, we put it in the hands of citizens, then citizens can use this information to constructively, meaningfully engage those in government, those in shadow cabinet, the alternative views, the alternative policies, so that the country can evolve and have better policy environment. So we thank the minister, we thank you, Bwana Director, we thank you, Karim, Honorable Karim Masaba, very able shadow minister for tourism, and very informed. We thank you. We thank also Amos, a private developer. Can you imagine to have private sector to give his personal experience, even in his busy schedule in Nairobi? We thank you for having taken time to inform this discussion. And of course, we thank our own sister Daisy from the UK and for the submissions you made to benchmark and say this is how tourism is taken seriously in the UK. And we join hands with you in advocating for what belongs to us to be based here. But of course, it means our parliament must now vote sufficient money, and we put a museum befitting of a museum, the name called museum, and really be able to keep all this. So I think it's important that we take tourism very seriously. And for those who say domestic tourism is not important because it is just making the same money circulate, my brother, my sister, even by you going there, you're sustaining those jobs, you're sustaining those services instead of closing down. And also beside you getting to know, yes, we all belong to the same economy, but some have more than others. And so there's nothing wrong in those who have actually going out and taking their families to be able to. And also we are happy that our government has made a clarification that for citizens, and I think it also goes for citizens of East Africa, they have a different rate as opposed to the international tourists. I think that's a good policy position to take. So we must thank all of you for participating here. But AFLI is trying to achieve 3-4 things. One, we want to increase citizens' utilization of this data. There's no point for us to keep this information. We bring it to this space. We send it to you. And then you now come. We want to increase your participation of citizens. We want to increase utilization of this information by citizens to engage decision makers so that when the Minister for Tourism goes to his office or the director, he takes a decision like you are the one yourself who was the director, like you are the one who was the minister. He takes your views into consideration. That's why we organize this space. Or not all of us can be a director for tourism, can be a minister or a shadow minister. But for those who are privileged, who God has given the grace, or who have been elected to those positions, I think it is important for the rest of us citizens to support them to succeed and support them to do a good job to the best interest of citizens. So that's why this platform is organized. Last week, we hosted Honorable Dr. Chris Byarumunsi here, and also the shadow, supposed to be chief whip of the opposition, and he delegated to the NUP Secretary General. So we are happy that you are engaging in this platform. We brought the media, like we brought the civil society. So we thank all of you for participating. The second objective is we want to promote citizens' engagement with the decisions Parliament makes. It's not enough to elect. So in between election cycles, what engagement takes place? It's not enough to elect leaders and abandon them there. They will be taken over by other interests, by industry, by the executive, others say even by mafia. So if we citizens are not active, that's why we need to stay engaged. And you as citizens who are the employers of MPs, employers of ministers, employers of the president, because these are just job seekers. They came to you, they wanted the job of president, they wanted the job of minister, they wanted the job of MP, and you elected them, you gave them for 5 years. There's a contract. So we as citizens should now stay engaged and help them to perform. But based on what information? Africa Leadership Institute, UMI is getting into Parliament, getting the evidence, tease it out, and give it to you. Then you engage. So that's why when we give you the chat, even if you're able not to talk, at least drop your comment, make your recommendation, in the chat because we pick it out. Then finally, how to sustain this? How to sustain this? So the only way we can sustain this is your increased participation and your sustained engagement. You're so important. So now, what are we saying? We want to open up. We stand for open government. We want government which is transparent, government which is accountable, government that is participatory, and a government that is responsive. So forums like these help us to open up so that, how did Uganda go to COVID-19? Like this. Did we participate in bringing those measures? Maybe yes, through our representatives in parliament. Maybe no. Now, how are we going to come out of COVID post-recovery? So that's why a meeting like this is useful so that citizens can contribute ideas so that open response and open recovery from COVID-19. So once more, thank you very much. And I wish you all success. And we join hands to support our colleagues inside government and support our colleagues inside parliament and really pray for them and support them so that they can succeed, so that when they take decisions, they take it to the best interest of citizens. So thank you very much. And for the minister, we shall pull down this discussion and share it with you and whatever comments came out of there. And also to Honorable Masaba, you've really thanked us enough. You have shown interest. You promised to come again. We'll also pull this out so that you can share it with your colleagues in the alternative government in parliament, so that when that time comes, citizens, don't stop here. When the time for budget comes, please, AFLI is putting a platform where you can use even your Kabiriti, you can use your Android, you can use your Apple to send text, a voice, or even a picture to your MP. That's when we can support the Ministry of Tourism and ask our MPs. If all of us send SMSs, if all of us send and bombard our MPs to put more money in tourism, I think they will listen to us. So we're putting down that platform. So I thank you for supporting the sector. And Bwana Director, you take back to the minister that citizens are supporting this sector so much. Even if they had a way, if there was voting today, I think your budget would have been increased if there was citizens that were voting. So we thank you and thank you very much and God bless you. Over to you, Warike.
Thank you, Honorable David Pulkol, for those enriching conclusions. We have come to the end of this dissemination workshop. Thank you very much for your time. My colleague Marvin would like us to enable our videos, and then we just take a selfie, which we can keep for a record as participants of this event. Thank you.
It's just enable videos shortly, and we take just a picture, screenshot for us. Yes, Duncan Mwebazi, enable your video. Honorable Masaba, Mr. Bechangana, Mrs. Chomgisha, please enable your videos. I'm taking
enable your videos so that we take a screenshot.
Yes, Mr. Otile Joseph.
And in a special way, let me recognize one participant who we did not notice last week, Honorable Evelyn Chemtai.
Yes.
The Vuko woman MP was participated last week, and she requested for a link to participate in this show. We recognize you. And then my colleague from the New Vision, Mr. Charles Opolot, you failed to speak, but we really appreciate for supporting Africa Leadership Institute and what Africa Leadership Institute seeks to achieve. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I've taken the picture. Thank you very much. We meet again in the next engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.